You're listening to The Joe Show here on AM 930 Progressive Talk. Thanks for joining us today. We're talking with Kshama Sawant. She is a socialist running for the State House of Representatives in District 43 down in the Seattle area. But she's here in town to speak this evening, guest of Socialist Alternative at Western Washington University. 6 o'clock tonight, Academic Instructional Center West, room 203. It's a free event. You can park free on the south end of the campus there in the gravel lots. Also speaking this evening, Mike LaPointe. He's an independent running for the U.S. Congress, been involved in the Occupy movement. We've had him as a guest here on the Joe Show before. He's running against 2nd District Congressman Rick Larson. And Shama, let's go back to the phones and welcome Joseph to the program. Hi, Joe. Or Joseph, I should say.
Well, I just wanted to ask the guest one question, and I want to say that to have everything out front here is that I am a democratic socialist of America. We are not as active as I had hoped that we would be, but one of the things that we clearly rejected the Leninist concept of the dictatorship of the proletariat. I'm sure your guest knows what that means, and I would like to ask her, do you reject the concept of the dictatorship of the proletariat as specially outlined by Lenin?
Thanks for your question, Joseph. I think, in the interest of the broad base of listeners that have, tuned in and are going to be listening to the podcast later, I would like to, first give some background. There was a lot of, we just talked about the media propaganda, the media offensive for decades that was carried out by the capitalist economies against the ideas of socialism. And one of the problems in this has been also how different socialist groups themselves, over the history of time, I really don't have time to get into it, in some ways fell for some of that propaganda, also had differences of opinion, and so on and so forth. What I would like to say in response to this question is, honestly, I don't know if I want to get into the whole dictatorship of the proletariat question, because I don't think it is going to really resonate with most listeners. What I will say, though, is that at this moment, what should our focus be? We are right now, we are living in an era where the global working class, ordinary people, the poor, the low income, the vast majority of the 7 billion people who are living on this planet, not to mention the environment, are just completely reeling by the ravages of capitalism. And what are the problems? We've talked about hunger, starvation, lack of healthcare, lack of education, lack of any political representation, and lack of public transit, and the list goes on and on. And so I would say that regardless of differences of opinion among people on the left, there is so much we can agree on. At this moment, by talking about the differences of different socialist groups on the left, I think we are missing the point. The point is that there is this entire millions of people out there who are angry and outraged about the bailouts. They're angry about the budget cuts, and they're looking for a solution to this problem. And we, as socialists, can play a big role in that. We can go out there and tell people, look, we don't have to accept this agenda. In the state of Washington, the Democrats, they're telling you that their hands are tied, and the budget cuts can't be helped because the state treasury is empty. And what we should be doing is leading the way out there and saying, no, that's nonsense. That is not true. This is one of the wealthiest states. We have some of the biggest multinational corporations, some of the most profitable corporations, some of the most super wealthy people here, multi-billionaires. What we need is an economic agenda in Olympia that will actually work for ordinary people. What do I mean by that? An example of that is that for the last several decades, the state legislature, which has been headed by the Democratic governorship, Democratic majority House and Senate, has given away over 500 tax exemptions to multinational corporations. Even reversing those will bring back $6.5 billion into the state revenue that can be used directly for education and social services. That is an absolutely urgent crisis we have. We have a crisis in public education, we have a jobs crisis, we have millions of people who are unemployed and are homeless. Right now, homelessness is increasing by the day, foreclosures are going on. There are so many urgent tasks that we on the left have to be doing. And we're hoping that through this election campaign in the 43rd district in Seattle, we're hoping to put forward that example, that by saying that, look, we refuse to accept this agenda of the two-party system, so should you, and it should not just be my campaign that is challenging the Democrats. Left challengers should be running up and down the length of the state and rejecting the corporate agenda in Olympia.
Well, kind of along those lines, you mentioned big corporations here in this state that are fabulously successful. They employ a lot of people, and they do contribute, maybe not as much as they should in many cases, as far as paying taxes. I think of Boeing that doesn't pay much tax at all and gets huge tax breaks. But what is your, just in the big picture, what are your feelings about these corporations? Should they be controlled by the democratic process? Should we have a say in them, or should they be private-run enterprises, as they are, that simply contribute more from in the sense of paying more taxes and contributing materially to our society? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question. I mean, I would say that as we are calling for in this election campaign, I would say the first huge step would be to demand that these corporations that are benefiting in the form of huge profits and huge bonuses to their executives and multi-million-dollar paychecks to these few individuals, we should point out that these benefits that they are getting are on the backs of ordinary working people. So I would say a huge starting point would be to demand that the regressive tax system in the state of Washington be ended. All these tax breaks that are being given to corporations be reversed, the budget cuts be reversed, public education be fully funded, healthcare be fully funded. We are calling for a statewide single-payer healthcare, and nationally we have been actively advocating for a universal single-payer healthcare system. I would say that just by our experience of how other countries like Canada have got single-payer healthcare, or how we in the United States have made progress in terms of women's rights and the civil rights movement and the anti-Vietnam War movement and so on, our experience in all those movements shows that we have to really bring about a mass movement. We have to have a groundswell on the streets in order to make this change happen. And our experience shows that it's not something that you can just ask the corporation nicely and they're going to give it to you. No, if they were going to give it to you just by asking them nicely, then this would have happened decades ago. We wouldn't be fighting the same battles that our parents and our grandparents were fighting, for our basic right to have a decent standard of living. This has been the same battle over and over and over again. And so we should not have any illusions that this will just be a question of lobbying certain legislators or writing nice letters to Bill Gates and so on and so forth. This is an example that shows that the agenda and interests of big corporations and the capitalist class are totally in conflict with the interests of ordinary working people, the working class, women, children, elderly, disabled, and so on. So we have to recognize that conflict, and we have to fight for our own interests. And what that means is participating and helping to create and lead mass movements that can demand this change. I mean, every single change, if you look at, I'll give you a very good example, the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, Roe v. Wade, which, gave women reproductive rights, the ending of the Vietnam War, all these highly progressive events, they did not take place when a Democrat was at the White House. They took place in the Nixon era. And it was not because Nixon wanted them. Nixon was a well-known racist and bigot. The reason it happened was because mass movements were tremendously active in those days, and they different mass single-issue movements coalesced together and energized each other and demanded that these changes happen. We need a new civil rights era. We need a new anti-Vietnam War era. We need that civil rights era in the 21st century to make those changes happen. But ultimately, I will, in answer to your other question, I would argue that will not be enough. It will not be enough to simply tax corporations as hard as it will be to do it. We will see all those gains disappear down the line for the future generation. So ultimately, we have to argue against capitalism, because capitalism is the root cause of all these enormous problems that we're facing. And corporations like Boeing while I'm arguing for them to be taxed at first, ultimately they have to be brought into democratic public ownership. You know, the equipment and machinery was created by workers of the state of Washington and other workers in the United States. The people who are working there are ordinary people who are not getting the millions of dollars of, you know, bonuses from Boeing's profits. So ultimately, all the profit that Boeing makes rests on the backs of ordinary people. So why should ordinary people not take back what belongs to them, which is what I mean by democratic public ownership.
All right, quick break, back with more, including your calls, 734-5697. My guest, Kshama Sawant. She is a socialist running for the State House of Representatives in District 43. And you can find out more about her campaign and even contribute money if you'd like to. I'm sure she wouldn't turn it down. Vote Sawant, SAWANT.org. Vote Sawant. Or you can find out more about her as well as Socialist at socialistalternative.org. Back with more here on The Joe Show in just a moment.